Alright, so this is the Bio Filter 5000 from ProEco. We have a 10,000. It's basically two of these mounted together to become a 10,000. And this is the UV light, the 18, or we have a 36 that mounts onto the filter. I'm going to walk through the filter today and just show you some of the really cool features of it. This is a gravity-fed filter. So what that means is the water enters from this side and it exits from here. When it exits, it has to gravity feed back to the pond. It cannot go uphill from here. It has to go downhill. So this is going to be at one of your highest spots, or the highest spot in the whole system. So your pond is somewhere in your yard. You may have a waterfall. This is behind that waterfall or behind the creek at the highest spot, and it gravity feeds back. You may ask why use this filter over pressure filters. One of the biggest reasons is it's far more efficient than a pressure filter. When it comes to the biological cycle, you have more aerobic and anaerobic action inside these filters than you do in a pressure filter. Doesn't matter what type of pressure filter, it's just the case. And the reason for that is, as I begin to open this up, I'll take the lid off. I'm just going to tilt this a little bit so you can see. I'm just going to remove some of the packages of fittings. We'll explain all those in a moment. But the reason that this filter is so efficient is the water enters and then it changes direction. It's aimed downward. It goes down underneath the filter to the bottom side of this foam, comes up through some mats down there which remove all the really heavy solid organics, and then comes through the foam, which is the aerobic and the anaerobic. The aerobic is the blue foam area and the anaerobic is the yellow foam area. Once it passes through there, it goes inside the screen and it comes out the exit up and flows out the outlet. So what happens is the water is changing direction like this multiple times while passing through different types of media. What that does is it slows the water down, allows all the solids to be removed from it very efficiently. It stores them, the solids, on the exterior of these foam pads where they can have the bacteria, takes care of the solids, breaks them down, and that's the biological cycle all happening in a very small, compact little filter. Very, very efficient. As I said, the inherent con of this filter, those are the pros, but the con is that once the water enters, it has to gravity feed back to the pond. We'll now just show a couple of different setups with this. So with the filter, you receive a bunch of different bags of parts. And if you were just going to use these parts by themselves, what happens is this comes off. You have two gaskets, two O-rings right here. And if you were just going to end up not using a UV light, what you would do is take these and put these on. This little part goes on the inside with the gasket. This little part goes on the outside with the gasket, like that. And what happens is this becomes the inlet for water. You're going to have two of them. And you go from there. We also have the ability to plug one off. I'll show you that in a minute. So if you just want to use one inlet, which you can if you have a small enough pump, or you can tee into two inlets if you have two pumps. The reason you want to have these little devices here, one, is the water, and it's diverted downwards. That's the downward part. What you have right here are two little nipples that inject oxygen. They suck air in. So as that water comes into the filter, it's filled with a lot of oxygen. In this first little side of this filter, you should see all kinds of bubbles. That means it's working efficiently. Go from there. Now, on the outlet side, what you have is you have a pipe on the outlet. This is not a specific pipe size. It's actually like 60 mil. You can't get anything that fits this nicely in North America. What we do typically often is we'll just take a bigger pipe and just stick it up here and have it come down. Or we have this right inside the liner. So the liner would come underneath the filter up the backside so that the water can just drop out of here in your creek or your stream and go back into the pond. That's a really easy way to do that. Some of the other filter parts that you're going to get in this device is, this is a different outlet for you to use if you want to use it there. That threads in. This can go on to 2-inch pipe, 1-inch pipe, that type of stuff. You do not want to use this unless you have very, very low flow coming in here. If you have 2,000 gallons an hour or 1,500 gallons an hour, you may be able to go to the 2-inch. But if you're running this at about 3,000 gallons an hour, which is what it's normally sized for, you absolutely don't want to downsize this pipe. If you downsize this pipe, the filter could overflow. What happens is, if you're putting more water in the filter than can exit, the water can overflow and you can completely drain your pond. So it's really critical. We typically upsize this. So meaning, if this is say about 2.5 inch, which is it's pretty close to, it's a 3-inch non-kink pipe size, 60 millimeter. What we end up doing is using 3-inch ABS, 3-inch sewer pipe or something like that that's bigger, so you have lots of space. You don't want to have any kind of back pressure on this because that causes it to overflow. Some of the other parts that are in here is you have different types of attachments for these. You have extra O-rings. There's the plug that you have if you wanted to plug this off. You could put a plug in one of them, cap it off. So those are all the parts that just come with the filter. When it comes to cleaning the filter, I will tell you, you don't want to clean this filter very often. Truthfully, you want to do it once, twice a year, that's it, because the dirtier the filter is, the more anaerobic and aerobic capacity it has. What that means is, when it comes to biological filters, the dirtier they are, the more efficient at filtration they are. So a clean filter has very little bacteria in it built up, whereas a dirty filter will have a lot of bacteria built up. So what happens when you really want to clean it and get to it, you're going to turn your pump off, and you're just going to slide these up and out, and then you can do one of two things. You can take them over to a bucket of water, which is typically what I would recommend, just a big bucket of pond water. You can use tap water, but chlorine is going to affect the bacteria. And you're going to bang these off. A lot of times just go bang them off, get the excess off. The matting, you'll have matting on the outside of this, you'll get them off. You can squeeze them down when they're wet and inside of a bucket, that's a really good way. But you want to squeeze them down into cleaner water, because just like a sponge, when you squeeze that sponge, if you've got dirty water around it, when you let it go, it soaks up all that debris. So once you're done, these go back in. And just want to point this out, they go back in this direction. The holes that are on the end of this are on the outlet side. So these just slide right back in, and you go like that, see? So they all go down, and down below here is the matting, don't worry, that I'll pull out. So there's the matting that's down below. You're going to want to get this out. This will be loaded with what I refer to as biological cake. It looks like a cake, chocolate cake batter, and it's just loaded. So when you pull all that bacteria, all that waste out, it's incredible fertilizer, but don't put it on anything directly because it will burn it. It's so high in nitrates that it can burn whatever you're putting on. If you put it on your lawn, I guarantee it will kill your lawn. So you don't want to do that. If you dilute it, it's great in garden beds. It's incredible in your compost and stuff like that to just help all the biological process. So it works very well. What I'm going to do next is I'm just going to show you how you mount on a UV, because that's typically these are sold often with a UV in combination. So normally you'd be connecting this up like this with those parts like that, hooking a pump into this. You're not going to do that if you're using a UV. You're going to take this part and you're going to take your gasket, take your two gaskets, but here is a UV18, and what happens, alright, so I'm just going to show how the UV light mounts onto the Biotech filter, because I think that's really important to understand, is you're going to take the O-rings, you're going to put an O-ring on the one side of the inlets, you're going to put another one on the other side of the inlet, going to go like that, and then you're going to mount that onto the filter like this, and what you're then going to do is take another O-ring. We're now going to take the big O-rings, Um, and we're going to push it on the backside. Now, there's two inlets, or two outlets, and one inlet. Now, on the two outlets, the back outlet, you don't want to put any kind of restrictor on there. You're going to put the O-ring on, and then you're going to slide this down, and you're going to start to thread that on. And what's going to happen is you want to get it to where it's snug, but also, more importantly, you want to get it to where, I'm going to have to back that up. Snug, there you go, right like that. So the two dots, the two air intakes are aimed upwards. If you have it spun the other way around, the water comes shooting up. Now the water is going to go shooting down, okay? The next one, the first inlet, what you want to do is you want to actually cover that up a bit. What happens is the water enters here and it can go straight through into there. We don't want it to do that. We want it to pass over the UV light. So depending upon your pump size, if you have a very small pump, say about a 1,500 gallon or a 2,000 gallon an hour pump, you want to actually plug this completely up. And there is a little glass lens in the UV kit, the little glass lens that you'd put in there that completely covers that up. But if you have a bigger pump, what we can do is we actually have a little cylinder that you can rotate to restrict flow. So I'm just going to have this in there half open, and that would just sit right inside there, and that's in there now. And what happens is that will restrict the flow enough that it pushes the majority of the water over the UV light, but it does allow some water to come in, which is fine. Directly. So if you've got your bigger pump, like a 3,000 gallon or a 3,500 or something like that, this is what you want to do. You slap on the other piece there, and once you get that in, it should be good to go. There we go. Go nice. Perfect. We're there. The next thing I just want to point out, I'm just going to push on the inlet side of your filters, or any of our parts. These types of fittings are hose tail fittings. And what I want to explain is that if you have 1-inch pipe feeding this, you may be using this part right here. Well, you'll cut this off. You don't want to keep that on if you're not going to use it. But if your pipe goes all the way up to here, you're going to cut it to there. This product is specifically designed to be used with this type of pipe. This is called spiral hose pipe. Okay, it's actually hose size, it's not pipe size, and it's spiral. It's very, very flexible. One of the things about it is that after 5, 6, 7 years, you're going to need to replace this. In the sun exposed over time, this will begin to get brittle and break down. So you're going to get 5, 6 years, no problem. If it's exposed to the sun, if it's buried, that's fine. But if it's exposed to the sun, it definitely will need to get replaced. And this just slides all the way on. The fitting, see how it slides in, you'll clamp it. We don't supply clamps. You're going to have to grab those clamps. You just clamp it down and you're good to go. Okay. Sometimes if this is hard to get in, you put this, I'll put this in hot water, like a boiling water. Just put it in boiling water for a few minutes and it will slide right on, clamp it down, you're good to go. The other types of parts that we supply is oftentimes you'll get fittings like this, or like these, where they're a glue fitting. These fittings are not meant for the spiral hose. You can't glue spiral hose. However, there's another product that we use extensively in the pond market, and it is this type of product. You see how there's no ribs? It's actually smooth. This is called flexible PVC. It's a PVC product, and you'll find that you can glue those on. See the way that slid on? I would glue that on, no problem, and then that can just attach right to there, and you're good to go. Now, when you're using any type of pipe coming into filter equipment, pond equipment, you want to make sure that there's not a lot of tension on it. So what I mean by that is, if I had a really big bend right here and that was on there, there would be a tendency for this wanting to go like that, or it would pull on this joint etc. Or well, I've seen it actually spin the filter, turn something. You don't want to do that. There's all kinds of fittings that you can get for this type of product, whether it be 90s, that type of stuff that make your life easier. And that's what you want to use, is you just want to make sure there's no tension coming into the filters. Also, I like using the type of fittings that have the swivel so you can thread them off. I've seen before people use these types of fittings, which are a glue fitting that thread on, no problem. The issue with that is, if you ever want to do maintenance, you're having to actually cut fittings and cut hoses. That's why I really like using things that have a swivel union on them. Go like that. All these types of fittings always have a gasket inside of them. So you want to make sure anytime you're using a thread, if it has a gasket, you don't need any kind of Teflon on there, but if there is no gasket, you do need some type of sealant on the thread. But if there's a gasket, you're good to go. You don't need sealants. Okay? So let's just review this. Your pump is somewhere in a pond, in a skimmer, something like that. It's pushing the water up over to the filter. It's going to come through the UV into the filter. You've got the diverters that are diverting the water down. The water passes through the aerobic and anaerobic phases, and then it comes out the outlet. On the outlet, you absolutely don't want to have any kind of back pressure on here. You want that water gravity fed back. You don't want the water coming up, rising above that outlet. That outlet should just be 3/4 full of water. That's it. If you're above the outlet in water level, I can guarantee you have too much back pressure or you have too much water coming in. Okay? One of the two things, and that's not good. Call us if you have that issue. We'll help you resolve it.